another Chat and Learn with PowerToFly. I got us live here. Thank you for introducing yourselves to our guest speakers. And we're super excited to dive into this next hour. I had a chance to speak with our guest speakers offline and also just to read up on them. They've got so much empowering information to share. So I don't want to waste too much time. I just really want to dive into giving everyone the opportunity to share and participate for this next hour. So I want to start by saying thank you for taking the hour out of your day and joining us here live. I know that there are a lot of crazy things happening in the world, and hopefully we can navigate through some of those challenges today with our live callers here and with our guest speakers, so that we can kind of relieve ourselves of all of the mess that we've made together, and we can heal together and grow together. So with that said, we're here for an hour. Please participate. I know we live in a world where everyone is multitasking, and it's okay if you're feeding your kid or you're walking your dog or something like that, but I really, really invite everyone to not double task and be on the computer sending emails and doing other things. This will be enriched if you participate with us. So with that said, I've muted everyone upon entrance just to avoid every background noises, especially now that everyone's working at home or remotely. Put your virtual background on, turn your camera on if you can. It's okay if you haven't showered. We really just want to use this time to share together and to explore together. So I will sound like a broken record by the end of this chat. I want everyone to turn their cameras on if you feel comfortable to do so, and take yourselves off of mute whenever you've got something to share. If you want to keep something sensitive and have it be kept anonymous, feel free to write to me anonymously. You'll find my name in the chat box under Mariella. And then the last thing that I'll say is, again, this is being recorded, so please be present. You can rewatch this video later on PowerToFly. And then make sure you follow us on social so that you can keep up with the rest of our programming with the Chat and Learns. With that said, I want to really dive into this hour because you all are going to see that this hour is going to fly by. And so I just want to pass the mic to our guest speakers. And I know that you all are going to introduce yourselves individually, but I'll just pass the mic to you all now so you can introduce yourselves. Let us know how you came to learn about PowerToFly and then what you're excited to share with us today. And then we'll go on to your presentations.
Thank you for that amazing intro, Mariella. Good afternoon and welcome to Raising Culturally Conscious Kids with Zaj Bajipura and Sunaina Devi. We learned about PowerToFly online. I learned about it from Zaj, and we are so incredibly honored to be able to share some of this knowledge base with you because these times are pretty drastic and call for some proactive compassion in the world. And we'd like to help spread any kind of awareness or any of the tools from our toolbox that you can use. So we'd like to open our Chat and Learn with an acknowledgement and giving thanks to the land upon which we're all sitting or standing. And Saj would lead us in this.
As part of diversity and awareness, we would like to offer respect and gratitude to the land we are on and all the indigenous tribes that have nurtured and tended this land throughout history, so we may be enjoying it now. Where we're located, the native tribe is Seminole. In our resource page, which you'll receive at the end of this chat, you can also find which indigenous tribes are in your area. So let's take a moment of silence right now in reverence and gratitude. Thank you all for participating.
Hi.
Beautiful. I'm super excited to learn about you all a little more. So I'm just going to go to the next slide so that you can give us your full-on presentation of yourself. And then you can, of course, we'll open the floor up for our live callers to ask you questions about your personal journeys as well.
Great, thank you. My name is Sunaina Devi, and I'm non-binary, and my pronouns are she, her, they, them. I'm a single mom of a high schooler with autism who is also bisexual and has a combination of learning disabilities. I'm a 9/11 survivor and a former Wall Street executive. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. I'm a Reiki master for more than 20 years now. I've been certified in yoga for 25 years, certified in hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming for over 20 years, certified in addictions and recovery coaching for more than 15 years, and have been a play therapy supervisor for over a decade. I am a 3-time cancer survivor, living with a disabling congenital disorder, and I coach others on how to take charge of their health and build resilience. I've experienced working with children in and out of the school environments, including working with refugee teens in the Haitian community. And I'm also a disabled woman of color who ran for local office this year and won my seat in a small grassroots position that will help me have direct influence in rebuilding my community after this pandemic. I've been working with Show and Heal since its inception on mental health initiatives, diversity videos, and have developed our Self-Care 101 program.
Beautiful. Sunana, thank you so much for sharing all of that about yourself. And I'm sure that we're going to learn more about you and just all about your journey, and be just, inspired by the beautiful work that you're doing at home, in your personal life, and with work. So thank you for that. We'll be sure to let you all know at the end of the chat as well how you can connect with these beautiful people who are presenting today, so that you can follow with their journey and support the good work that they do. So let's move on now to Zayed. Zayed, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I like I like long hikes in the mountains and romantic candlelight dinners. Oh, professionally, I'm a harmonizer, connecting and collaborating on deep, multifaceted levels with a myriad of diverse communities. I'm also a public high school teacher who founded the nonprofit Show and Heal, and I'm an inclusionist, actively advocating for the social inclusion and self-care of children. Through my eyes and heart, I know all children are created equal. My purpose is to make sure that everyone, especially the children, know that they are equal. I use my authenticity and inclusiveness to empower and inspire children and young people to fully accept themselves and others. And what you'll be seeing right now is an example of our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives, which includes a virtual diversity day highlighting local cultures, and Show and Heal produced this during the pandemic.
Harshit and namaste everyone. How are you? All the youth and adults in the world. You are beautiful no matter your skin color, caste, weight, ability, where you come from, what religion you practice, how much money you have, who you decide to love, or what you become when you grow up. Happy Diversity Day from Show and Heal. Love, Miss Sai.
Before we get right into the slides, I want to explain that we're going to jointly go over some key points in this little presentation that we put together, and then we're going to open the floor for questions and in-depth discussion about how to put these ideas into real-world action in our families and in our daily lives. I'm going to be reading the slides out loud so as to include anyone with learning or visual disabilities. Cultural competency is having an awareness of one's own cultural identity and views about difference, and the ability to learn and build on the varying cultural and community norms of students and their families. It's the ability to understand the within-group differences that make each student unique, while also celebrating the between-group variations that make our world a tapestry.
We cannot deny that we live in a globalized economy. Consider the cuisines you crave, the spices that spice up your life, who laboriously picked the produce on your plate, or painstakingly stitched your brand name clothing, or assembled your automobile. Do you see the faces of international or even immigrant children in America who made it possible for us to drink coffee or indulge in chocolate? Are you aware of the suicide-provoking conditions Chinese employees are under making your phone? Do you have any idea of all the nationalities and populations who risked their lives to fight in American wars or dangerously constructed railroads and skyscrapers? Can you feel the sweat, tears, and blood of Black enslaved people physically and mentally who toiled the soil bearing fruit and who built this country without reaping the rewards of their labor? These are some questions I pose to my students and online audience, who may forget the roots of everything they are dependent on and likely could not live without. Cultural competency widens your scope of how the world works, how people live, and ingrains a sense of empathy for others and demonstrates how interconnected and interdependent we humans really are. From my lived experiences and interacting with children and populations from all corners of the world, I've learned that there's so much diversity within cultures that is widely ignored or misrepresented. Whole populations are generalized and marginalized without granting proper deserved attention to their uniqueness and idiosyncrasies. We are all necessary in this world, and the world is a better place with us in it, no matter where you are from. Today's takeaways are going to be real life strategies for raising culturally competent children, the real-time Q&A with us who are experienced in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and you'll leave with culturally responsive and culturally sensitive resources.
So first, I just want to say thank you both for the beautiful introduction. I know that we still have a little ways to go with you all introducing the beautiful work that you're doing, but I love that. I don't know, Zayed, if you were reading a poem, but I love that you're bringing emotional intelligence into this conversation from the beginning, and for, in my opinion, you know, inclusion and diversity and equity is just, it's kind of this new buzzword. People don't really know where to place it. They don't really know how to activate it. And, you know, getting creative and channeling our inner voice through poetry is definitely a way that we can just, you know, bridge some of these gaps and open up some of the walls that we built. So I just want to say thank you. And I'll move on to the next slide for you all.
Thanks. Remember to use food and your body's own biochemistry to learn about different cultures. You know, studies have shown that certain foods release dopamine and other neurotransmitters within the body. And we as psychologists and educators can use this information to encourage people to use foods to connect children with different cultures. In our resource handout, we have included a list of recipes from all around the world that are also foods which release dopamine within your body. So have fun and play around with food. And here's a tip: try a food from a different culture each week.
Beautiful. And seeing food as medicine as well, right? I love that that's one of the things that I'm understanding as well, and how we can enrich the way that we think and the way that we participate and activate ourselves by, you know, really empowering that phrase, you are what you eat. So I love that you're connecting, you know, having those notes being played, the dopamine notes, and, you know, finding that passion and connectiveness through food. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you, Mariella.
So if you don't know already, there is a Google Translate app that you could basically repeat anything in up to 90 languages, from German and Japanese to Czech and Zulu. They may already be doing this, but don't tell your kids. You can also look up swear words. And another tip is that watch age-appropriate movies together as a family, discuss differences and similarities. There's also many streaming services that have foreign films with subtitles or English dubbing. And I watch a lot of Bollywood movies because I don't know Hindi, but I'm able to get more acquainted with my culture, and it's really fun. Actually, some of my American friends watch more Bollywood than I do. Learning a language also opens a window to cultures, traditions, food, television, and films from a native perspective. I was able to study Italian in high school and traveled to Italy with my class. We learned to cook authentic dishes and appreciated art, history, and fashion. How many languages do you speak again, Sunena?
I speak 8 languages. I enjoy learning languages. I don't know. A culture's writings give a snapshot of the history of their people's lifestyles and their beliefs. Here on this slide are some links to some poetry websites, as well as different prayers or scripture that are great to expose kids to. And here's a tip: pick a prayer from a different religion to read each week and let your children choose the prayer. During the pandemic, I taught my son the Hindu epic, the Bhagavad Gita, and it was long and it can be really boring for kids. So I actually found animated YouTube video versions to make it more interesting and engaging for my son, who, due to his dyslexia, hates books, but he loves anime. And also another experience that I had was as former chaplain of the Everglades region for the Boy Scouts of America with a minor in religious studies from NYU, I used my platform in scouting to bring diverse prayers and poems into our religious services at campouts with the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and found that that was a great way to introduce some of the kids there to some diverse religions.
I know that this was a fear with my parents probably, and it may be a fear with other people, that if a child goes outside their family's religion, they may convert or leave their religion. But I feel like giving a little bit of more space to your child to explore new religions is actually really neat, because it expands their own knowledge and they learn that there are many paths in life. I have a solid faith in my family's religion, as I've witnessed it do wonders for them. And it actually has brought me to this stage of compassionate openness and self-development. In recent years, I've gravitated to reading other religious philosophies, such as Buddhism, as it deepens my understanding of meditation, detachment, and letting go. I also enjoy reciting the works of Sufi poet Rumi and present-day Sikh poet Rupi Kaur.
Rupi Kaur is amazing. Can we have the next slide, please? Thanks. Utilize your privilege, okay? Don't shy away from conversations on equity and social justice and how to use one's privilege, because we all have some type of privilege if we take an honest look. And here's a tip: gratitude lists are a great way to discover the myriad ways in which we are all privileged. Habitually drawing awareness to gratitude is a great way to build resilience in kids. I remember a time in West Palm Beach, my son was about 8 years old, and he was hanging out with his friends in the park, and he joined in taunting a Black child with a racial epithet. I'm not going to say what. But when I had learned that he had done this, I took him to their picnic table and we sat down with the family and we introduced ourselves, and we got to know them so that he could realize they're just like us in so many ways. And he could also begin to understand that he'd hurt someone's feelings, and then we could jointly offer an apology and, more importantly, a promise to do better.
To be honest, I didn't know how much privilege I had, because growing up South Asian, I felt second class to boys, and I was not white. As I matured, I became more aware of the advantages I did have, such as being an American citizen, model minority, native English speaker, able-bodied, and also being born into a higher Hindu caste, all of which have propelled me to uplift those who do not have the same privileges. Also, Show and Heal uses its collective privilege to draw awareness to socially excluded groups. We are empowered to make documentaries and social media campaigns to break stereotypes of other cultures and educate society on their humanity.
Thank you.
Wow,
Next
I love
slide. Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. I see people nodding, the folks who have had their cameras on, and I just love that the story that you're saying. The case, we can call it a case study. This is real, like in action. This is happening. These really tough conversations are happening at tables, right, and in parks. And I love that you walked through with your son how to remedy something that caused a lot of pain and hurt, and because of societal norms and systemic racism and all these things that maybe he was unaware of, or maybe he wasn't, but having your parent walk you through something like that, I think will be definitely something that we can all learn from, whether it be our neighbors or our friends or our children or our nieces and nephews, to hold their hands and make sure that they don't get left behind in this collaboration that we are living as humanity. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate the story.
Thank you. You know, it really is a testament to the capacity to be able to engage in these uncomfortable conversations, because it's not easy to walk our child through some of these learning opportunities, right? But we have to do it. It starts with the parents. Like this slide says, kids see what's being modeled. And so we have to up our own game, right? And it's also important that we have these conversations with our kids, because it's so much safer for them to air out their issues and practice things with us than risk offending somebody that they don't know. And especially with my son having autism, I have to very mindfully walk him through certain lessons and do role playing and practice. What does it look like to show compassion to somebody? Or what does it look like to be inclusive with people? Let's practice it. He learns best from kinesthetically walking through scenarios than just listening about it or watching something that he's disconnected from. So we really have to take responsibility for this as parents.
Absolutely, absolutely. Zayed, did you want to add something to that response or speak about this slide in general? Should I move on to the next?
Well, I'm a child, but I feel like my parents did expose me to a lot, because fortunately, they moved to San Francisco. I don't think they knew how liberal San Francisco was, or diametrically opposite from the Indian village that they grew up in, because I grew up with a lot of things that they told me, you see it, but don't do it, right? Like I saw men openly kissing, women holding hands. And I mean, we enjoyed foods from all different backgrounds because San Francisco is so neat. There's all these ethnic enclaves. So I was able to appreciate food and music and festivals because they, thankfully, fortunately, landed or arrived or settled down in San Francisco. And I'm so blessed because, and also growing up in hospitality, I was interacting with strangers on a daily basis. I'm meeting people from Italy, Japan, India, and other cultures and countries. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I think that's what also has helped me develop an affinity for children, because the kids that I've worked with through all my positive youth development have been from all parts of the world too. So it's like naturally, I'm just so engaged and just like, I just love culture so much. And I really feel that my parents did model that, that acceptance or learning about different foods and languages and working with people from all backgrounds. So it does help when the parents do model it.
I love that. I love that. And just one thing that came that I want to highlight as well. I used to work in hospitality, and I feel like everyone should work in hospitality. I feel like it should be a requirement because you are automatically humbled. You make connections. Your world opens up, and it really challenges you to face certain biases that maybe you have on someone based on whatever you've learned. I like to say the A side of history because we often don't learn the B side. I'm sure Zayed, you can speak on that as far as what is history books. So having that in-person interaction is key. And actually we have a great follow-up question here from Julie. What is the best response when someone makes a racist remark? And I'll pass the mic to both of you all because I'd love to hear both of your opinions.
So what I do is I encourage people to create and enforce boundaries for themselves. Okay, and there's a simple formula that we can teach right now. It just takes like 15 seconds. And that is what we call the ACT formula for limit setting. And so A stands for acknowledging the feeling, right? And C stands for communicating the limit. And T stands for targeting an alternative. So how you could use this in a racial setting is acknowledging the feeling could look like this. I know you're just trying to be funny, right? You're trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other person and say, I feel you, I get what you're trying to do here. And then C, communicate the limit, but it hurts my feelings when you call me a towel head or a dot head. And then target an alternative. You can say, I'm confident you can find a way to be funny without being insulting. And so that's a great formula to teach kids early on. And we teach this in the school in Show and Heal Self-Care 101 in the high school setting. We're actively teaching teenagers how to create and enforce these boundaries and talk about some of the issues that they all share where there might be a need for this in their lives. And in the resource handout that we are providing at the end of this, there's a link to a video where I kind of walk through what this looks like. So if somebody wants some more information on that, I have a YouTube video that talks about limit setting and boundaries.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I love that the first step is acknowledgement, because I feel like one thing that's gotten us into a big ball of trouble right now is that it's been so much stuff has been swept under the rug. And now we're dealing with elephants in the room, which makes people say things that maybe they don't realize the weight and the toxicity of what they're saying. So I love that step one is acknowledgement, because that just really brings you to a sober reality of, you know, this is this feeling, and it brings back that emotional intelligence bit too that I love to bring into the conversation. What does that feel like? And to acknowledge that, and then to help grow from there. I love that. Zayed, did you want to add to that?
Sure. I wanted to say that a lot of people may assume things about us. Like, so I have, for instance, this is an example that happened actually at school, where one of my students called another student who's from Bangladesh. He told him like, oh, where are you going now after school? To the Quickie Mart? And I flipped it to telling that student who made that comment, like, what could he say about you? And he even acknowledged, he's like, oh, that I'm gonna go do some landscaping. And although it's just to basically show multiple perspectives. And on the outside, even in Indian, what I was saying about earlier was that people don't know the idiosyncrasies and the uniqueness within one culture. Like India has so many different regions, but yet there's a lot of discrimination within the country that people aren't aware of. There are regions that are pitted against each other. There are, especially even also in South America and Central America, I have students that gravitate towards one another. So you'll have Mexicans that are against Guatemalans who don't, or people who, African Americans who don't want to be seen as Haitian. And so these are real life examples, but I try to explain to my students that on the outside, because of how uneducated some Americans are, they don't even know which country you're from. They don't even know all the things that you're trying to like stay away from. And so I really try to show that we have to be more unified and to have empathy for the other person, because on the outside, no one's going to even know the specific country you're from. So I try to show the multiple perspectives and how they're being perceived, and to really ingrain that sense of confidence and love for yourself, and to be true to yourself and to be proud of who you are and where you come from.
Well said, well said. And Julie, I know that you had a follow-up question. Did you get that question answered, or did you want to? Okay, perfect, awesome. I love this. So we've just got a couple more presentation slides so that we can dive into more of the good work that they're doing, and then we're going to go into your questions in just a second. So thanks for holding tight. So fascinating, all of the work and effort that you all are putting into this. So I really appreciate that. Again, let's dive into this slide.
So pronunciation, title, pronouns. As these are how you help show respect for a person, teach how shall I greet you. Personally, I go by Zayed, but I had a friend rename me to Zai because she was a little nervous about attempting my full name. And so I have actually gone by Zai, and it's my teacher name too, but other people may take it as a microaggression to be renamed. And so be very aware of that. And also don't assume people's pronouns, because it may go against what you grew up with, but that's a person's identity. As a teacher, I'm very careful to use my students' preferred names and their pronouns. And I'm actually still shocked that there are teachers who purposely do not call the students by their pronouns and that don't reflect their gender identity.
That's so sad. I also want to highlight, it's okay to stop mid-sentence and correct yourself when you find yourself slipping with someone's pronouns, right? Because when you stumble and correct yourself, it gives other people permission to do the same, right? The more human we are in front of others, the more human they allow themselves to be in front of us.
Absolutely.
And I want to share this anecdote of a couple of years ago. My son was, he attends a school that is a public charter school for autistic people. And so everybody who goes to the school has some form of autism. And one of the kids who was older than him by a couple of years was being picked on for being gay. And I'm so proud of my son, because he stood up for his friend, and then his friends started to turn the bullying on him and say, oh, well, are you gay too? And his response at the time was, so what if I was? And I thought that was very brave of him to do at around age 9 or 10. But I was really moved to see that having been exposed to LGBTQ culture, he felt comfortable and supported enough to come out at the age of 14 and use his identity to help stop bullying in his school. He actually outed himself to be able to support some of his other friends who were not as confident in themselves. So, you know, it really has a ripple effect. When we teach our kids this kind of stuff, they go out and they spread it in the schools with all their other peers who need that kind of love and acceptance.
I love that. And I love that you all are empowering everyone to practice what they preach and to walk the walk. So showing your humanity and not just, you know, expecting to be perfect, because that passes on this false realism to the next generation. And then we do have another question in the chat box. This is a great question, again, for those who might not know. So what do you mean about pronouns? Can you please clarify?
Pronouns are how you identify. Oh, sorry. Do you want me to say it or do you want to go?
No, I was just going to say, Zai, why don't you go ahead and take this one?
Okay, so yeah, pronouns are just how you identify, like she, her, hers, or some people are non-binary and don't want to pick a specific gender, and so they go by they and them. And I don't know if you want to share about your story with the pronouns, but it's basically how you want to be seen as.
I tried to raise my son gender neutral when he was younger, and he had very long hair, and people would always say, "Oh, you've got a beautiful daughter." And he never took offense to that. And sometimes people would ask him point blank, "Are you a boy or are you a girl?" And I love that his response was always something along the lines of, "I'm just Cyan." That's his name, Cyan. And so he didn't feel like he had to address that, you know, "I'm a boy" or "I'm a girl." He just wanted people to see him for who he is, you know, just the person. Gender wasn't important to him. And I think that freedom of being allowed to explore who he is allowed him that confidence to be able to come out at such an early age.
And I'd love to hear more if you have, I mean, because this is such a great opportunity for everyone to learn more. And I feel like I found myself saying the other day and I was just like, how did that even come out of my mouth? What a great time to be alive. All the craziness that's going on. And some days I know it's like up and down, and I know it's not just me, but those times when you're down, you want to be like, why am I even here? And the times when you're up, it's like, what a great time to be alive. And one of the reasons I say what a great time to be alive is because these conversations are happening. And I reflect on maybe, you know, some people in my ancestry that would not ever had the chance to share what they prefer to be called. And so this is a great time to start to learn together. And one of my big questions is, how do we get more parents and educators and community members to give that space to kids so that they don't have to be confined to basically what is a societal norm to check a box, essentially, and to, you know, identify one way or the other? How can we participate and give in the freedom to kids these days?
One of the things that I like to do is what I call parenting out loud. And so I don't just parent my son, I also talk about how I'm parenting my son. I talk about it on social media. I talk about it with my friends. We talk about it in Show and Heal Self-Care 101. We talk about it in Show and Heal videos. My son was speaking about his experiences with bullying and gender around, I want to say, age 9 or 10 on the Show and Heal videos. It's a really great opportunity to be able to talk about this stuff out loud with people as we're going through it. And so I'm always a big advocate of just put it out there, be an open book, allow people that window into seeing how you do it, because none of us are given a manual, right? We just have to live and learn.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's go on to this next slide here.
Okay, discuss how to speak to people and how not to, very specifically. You know, teach your kids to stand up for others and go over the what could you do in this instance conversations and role play and model asking those uncomfortable questions. I can't stress this enough. I think that pushing through uncomfortable conversations is like a path to freedom and empowerment. Honestly, it makes me a better person. And I can't tell you the number of uncomfortable conversations I've had since this pandemic began. It's one thing to, you know, be stuck at home with teenagers who come to you for everything. And I would really encourage people, don't shy away from any uncomfortable conversations. If you need help, reach out and ask somebody, ask a coach, ask a therapist, ask a teacher how you could do something, you know, look at these types of presentations. And always remember, you know, it's a little bit trite, but be an upstander, not a bystander. These are incredibly powerful lessons. And the earlier we teach these things to our kids, the better the whole prognosis for life. I remember growing up, I was one of only 4 Indian kids in the entire high school that I went to back in the 80s in New Jersey, if you could believe it or not, because I think they have like a 40% Indian population at this point in central Jersey. But I was really picked on for being awkward and dark and a bit of a geek, and was not very popular at all. And then this tall, beautiful redhead moved into town, and the popular girls went up to her and they were like, well, you could be friends with that clique or that clique or that clique, but you can't be friends with her. And she immediately used that privilege of being that pretty new girl and then they watched her walk up to me and say, you know, hey, I'm new here. And everyone over there keeps telling me not to be your friend. So, hi, my name's Stacy. Would you like to be my friend? And that meant the world to me. And we became best friends, and we're still friends today. And I learned so much from that because I was mousy when I was in junior high and the early part of high school. And I learned how to use my voice. And that's why I like to teach other people how to use their voice too.
Beautiful, beautiful story. And yes, it takes, I would love to know, you know, was it something that she just felt inside of her? Were her parents showing her the way? I mean, you know, because it's really fascinating to see how, especially now with social media and especially in the States. I live in Argentina now, and therapy is big here. Someone can show up late to a meeting, you know, a grown ass adult, and people don't look at them twice, and they actually say, you didn't miss anything, sit down. Whereas in the States, if you show up late because you were at your therapist, people will be like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And so just to take that taboo out of seeking help and asking for multiple perspectives and knowing that you don't have all the answers, that you don't know everyone in the world. And so to just really try to figure out how to add to your dialogue and for inclusion to happen. I love that you bring that story up that happened with you when you were in high school. Thank you.
So teach and learn world history and not just your own history. Choose toys and books that represent diversity and not just white people and white families, or even just heavily on any one culture. As a history teacher, I know, and maybe you are aware too, that that history is a collection of stories that come from the side of the victors. Unfortunately, history textbooks are not accurate or complete, and I have to rely on multiple resources that come directly from the source. So I use a lot of first-hand sources, unique histories, and narratives that are from the perspective of BIPOC. So for those who don't know, BIPOC is Black, Indigenous people of color, slaves, and women. And I've noticed that students do not see themselves in the textbooks because their histories are not included or are clumped together and generalized. And so they're not able to connect or relate to what they see and read, and they're also not as engaged. So I help my students learn about their own histories, as well as to see the connection between the past and the present. I open their eyes we have some resources that we've listed, and I'll share some more, but I open their eyes to the less known contributions from people that are from other countries, immigrants, African-American, and Indigenous. One recommendation that we do have is Oliver Stone's Untold History of the United States, based on Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, which you can watch on Netflix.
And I love that Netflix is actually they've still got a long way to go in my opinion, but starting to add these different, you know, stories and perspectives so that we do get a more holistic and well-rounded history. Someone that I'm loving right now, and I'm a little late to this conversation, but Yuval Noah Harari's beautiful work and research and books on Homo sapiens and how to get through with the 21st century dilemmas that we're going through, and just like looking back at our collective history and looking at all of it in a holistic way and not looking at it from a linear perspective, not only looking at, you know, from the printed A side of history, as I like to say, the ones that won and who are writing and who decided to write, you know, one side of the story. I love that you're flagging this, and I would love, I mean, I don't know if you're planning to come out with a book about, you know, being a history teacher these days in the States especially, but I would definitely be interested in reading that book.
And there was also concern that I think some parents are like, well, now that we're not learning traditionally, like, how do we make sure that they're getting as high quality information? But I've been using resources that are always online. And honestly, even Netflix, my students will remember lines from movies more clearly than they'll listen to something that we repeat over and over every week. So like Netflix, there's so many amazing documentaries that they could use. And we have other resources, again, that we put in that list. But honestly, there's so much out there that you can still have as high quality education that you're getting being on your own and being offline or being at a school.
Absolutely. And actually, I was fascinated with this interview that I saw with, I don't remember the person's name, but they were representing Generation Z. I mean, that was at least in the part of the headline of like, let's speak with Generation Z about this whole mess. And her perspective was so beautiful because she was like, I am deciding, and my parents support this decision, to not go through the public education system. I am going to empower myself by researching and building my own trade and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what courage, and do it, because there's not, in my opinion, you know, there are not enough people doing that. And I don't want to, you know, I'm not stepping on the education system, but I think that there's so much room for growth there. And that this one, you know, student took that into her power to say, I'm going to learn from my own by doing exactly what you're saying, Zayed, is compiling information and obviously having mentors and things like that, but just taking a different route so that you can have a more holistic perspective. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
All right, let's move on to this next slide here.
Celebrate holidays with friends. Yay! There are thousands of holidays across the globe each year celebrating nationality, historical dates, religion, customs, and many other interesting things. So invite others to join in your celebrations and likely they'll reciprocate. And here's a tip: many organizations hold public cultural events that are designed to introduce people to new cultures. Local social media has lots of info on such events, so attend a bunch. And here are some pictures on this slide of Zayed, myself, and my son at one of his birthday parties. My son's birthday falls in the same month as one of our most fun Hindu holidays, which is called Holi. So each year we make a Holi birthday party in the park, and I take a few minutes and I explain the significance of this harvest holiday and festival. And then we proceed to run around and throw dry and wet colors on all of our friends. And we start off wearing all white, and when we finish, we look like we completed a color run by the end of it. It's definitely like the birthday party of the year among his classmates. And so that's a way in which we share our culture with the kids who go to school with my son, and also all of my friends. So my friends participate too. And then at the end of the year, we also celebrate something called Christmakawali, which is where our friendship circle combines all of our end of the year holidays, which in our circle is Christmas and Hanukkah and Diwali, which is a Hindu holiday. And each year, somebody does like a 5 to 10 minute presentation on some aspect of each religion that we include in the event. And it's just so much fun to celebrate that with our friends. Not only have we shared our culture, but we've also learned a lot about cultures that we didn't know so much about before. And we attend things like Passover Seder, you know? And we also go to pride events, and we go to disability events, and we go to charity events for the less fortunate. I'm a stickler for making sure that my son gets his service in every year, because that also is a way to expose him to different populations. Zayed and I and my son spent Christmas Eve this past year out in Pahokee, which is by that huge big lake in the middle of Florida. And we just went out to serve some marginalized populations out there. And it was a wonderful way to connect and increase our network and expose my son to a whole part of Florida he'd never seen before.
Beautiful. So I just want to say we've got about 15 minutes left. So I want to kind of have a light pause here for folks to have the opportunity to unmute themselves and ask any questions or respond to any of the wealth of information that our guest speakers have shared so far. So I'll take a light pause. I'll take a drink of water. And if you want to be courageous, unmute yourself. Now's your time to shine. Sometimes that works. Okay, well, I've got a chat here in the box, so I'll flag this question here, and in the meantime, if someone wants to take themselves off of mute, feel free. Kimberly writes, I just had my first baby. She turned 5 weeks yesterday. When do I start teaching her all these practices? What are the best ways to start? Thank you for that. I'll pass the mics for whoever wants to join in on that question.
So it's wonderful. Congratulations on your new baby. Wow. Babies are so incredibly wonderful. I remember when I had my son, one of the biggest problems that I had was I felt like I didn't have time to do anything. I had a meditation practice that I used to do as part of my yoga, and I had to sort of give that up. But I learned how to turn breastfeeding into a type of meditation between my son and I, where we were exchanging this ring of energy. And so it cracked my mind open to just thinking outside the box when it comes to kids and teaching a culture. I know that at the toddler age, one of the things that I did was take him to story time. There are so many different story times and so many different cultural specific librarians. These actually exist. I happen to have a friend who teaches Judaism with kids, young kids, and does story time and puppet shows because I help participate in her puppet shows that she does online. And the one good thing about this pandemic is it's putting so much of this stuff within reach of us online. And so maybe a good Google might pop up as a culture-specific story time that would be really, really good for small kids. In the resource handout, I did include links of some books that are being read aloud. These are cultural books being read aloud by other kids from different cultures. And so I encourage you to just go through the list and click on the links and find all of the treasures that are in that resource handout when we're done with this.
And I also wanted to say that this was fascinating when I found out, but it's never too early to speak about the social construct of race and diversity of people. There are studies that show that infants show racial bias towards members of their own background or skin color against those of other races. And basically, it's saying that it's who the kids are exposed to, the babies are exposed to. So there's a way to prevent this racial bias if you're a parent, is to introduce your children to a variety of races. And like you said, online, through your friend circle, through these holidays, festivities, there's places of worships, there's virtual tours that we've also listed. You could take tours in other countries from the comfort of your home.
I love that. I love that. Okay, great. Thank you. This is a great question. And I love that we also had someone chime in. Dove says, read books to the baby. It's never too soon. And I definitely agree. One of the first books I brought back for my first niece was A is for Activist. And I was like, do you think it's too soon to have her start reading this? But they were like, oh, your crazy auntie is going to have you be an activist before you can even say a word. Okay, so we've got another great question here. What are the politically correct ways to address different cultures, Oriental, Asian, Black, African American, Hispanic, Mexican, or do we ask people how they would like to be addressed when we meet them or talk about them?
So I think we did cover that a little bit. We just mentioned to ask people how they would like us to address them. And I think that's super important to be teaching kids empathy, really, and cultivating emotional intelligence. We do have a slide that speaks to that as well. But I think this point is super important because if exposure to different cultures was all it took to combat racism, then that would mean that we wouldn't have racism in our major cities, right? Because they're melting pots of culture. But we do. right? So this is because you can be exposed to cultures and develop resentments or have poor perspectives or buy into separatist propaganda, or just inherit these beliefs that are passed down generationally. And the thing that psychologists and educators know is that the key to ensuring a softness in attitude and like a kindness in spirit toward others is making sure that we foster emotional intelligence and cultivate empathy in children. And this is the component that makes all the difference. Right? Empathy is the ability to recognize and feel and respond to the needs and suffering of people, and it fosters responsibility. And I like to say responsibility is your ability to respond. And so we did have a slide on this if you want to forward to that, because there's a small list of let's go back. Yeah, let's go on to this. No, back one. Yeah, this one. So in this list on the right side, here are some different things that we can teach children early on that help them then have that respect for somebody else, where they're interested in knowing how the person sees themselves and how they can utilize that information. So some of these ideas are teaching kids to learn to identify their feelings. That is a really huge one. Feelings charts are amazing. You can Google them, they're online. You match the facial expression with the word that tells you what that feeling is. And then you learn to express emotion in a healthy way. You can never start too young for that. I've worked with babies who are 3 days old. Children's songs also cultivate this emotional intelligence very well. And so a lot of these traditional songs that we hear, there's a reason they get passed down. There's a reason they're effective in teaching emotional intelligence and empathy. Also have kids participate in service learning projects, like I mentioned, Christmas Eve, what we did. Also engaging in mindful gift giving. When my son turned 6, his birthday was right after the earthquake in Japan at Fukushima. And so he had a charity birthday where he just asked for donations for Japan. And I thought that was pretty cool of him at age 6 to forego presents in order to help children. But we sat down and we had this conversation about all these kids who were his age and all their toys got washed away, and what can we do to help these kids who are 10,000 miles away and they're scared. And so this is a really great way to teach children how to become active, is charity birthdays. Also cultivating gratitude, like we mentioned before, and active listening skills, and participating in youth leadership programs. And if we could, I'd also like to go back to the disabilities slide right before this, because I do want to highlight that disability is a culture too. And ableism is a form of discrimination that is against people with disabilities, and it's a social prejudice. And that these disabilities can be physical, mental, emotional, developmental, learning-based, and even moral or spiritual. And this is important to me because as a disabled woman myself, I've had to fight long and hard to advocate for services for myself, education, healthcare. It's almost like a full-time job at times. And many people don't know what goes into the marginalization of disabled persons. So while we're talking about culture and religion and race and things like that, be mindful about empathy toward disabilities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have a private message here. I'm just going to go back to this slide because I feel like, this is something that we can actually practice as adults, and we should practice as adults in order to pass this down to the next generation as well. So I love that you neatly outlined how to recognize the power of empathy and how that can be, a vessel for change. Someone here has written me privately, I heard empathy is also perspective taking, that with a question mark. Does anyone want to comment on that?
Perspective taking?
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that phrase. Does the person who asked that want to elaborate on that? That's the first time I'm hearing that phrase.
So feel free to write in the chat box, or you can take yourself off of mute. And until then, what I assume, and let me know if I'm with you here, the person who's written me privately, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Is that what you mean by perspective taking? Yes. Okay. Yes. You're
I
right,
want to
yes.
share about I want to share about that because part of Show and Heal, I've done hundreds of interviews with families and kids from all these backgrounds, and I think sometimes people are afraid to like really be that curious, especially when we're adults. But people from different backgrounds are actually so open and receptive. They want you to ask them about why do they choose to wear a hijab or a turban or not eat meat, because they rather you go to them directly than get this like washed up version of what their religion is about or their sexual orientation. And so people are very open to that. And I think you do get to see multiple perspectives. With Show and Heal, we have a YouTube channel. We're on all social media platforms because young people are on there getting most of their information, if not all. And that is, we found an effective way to educate. They're hearing from people they don't normally meet or interact with, because today, if you don't know, our neighborhoods and schools are more segregated than ever in history. So they may not see someone who looks different than them, practices a different religion. A lot of my students assume that I'm Latina just because they've never met a South Asian before in their life. But everything, like, people are really willing to open up. And I feel like don't be so afraid, because they'll all, even if someone is not as receptive, there'll be people like Sunaina and I that will share and are very excited to share about our culture and our background. And watch Show and Heal interviews.
Yes, I love that. And always ask with love, right? And be
Exactly, politely, respectfully.
Exactly. So we have about 2 minutes left. So I know that, wow, this hour has flown by. I hope that you all can come back and dive into this more. I feel like this is definitely a conversation worth listening to, worth practicing, putting into practice at home. Whether you have kids or not, we are building the future together. So we are all community members in this. Please let us know how we can support the good work that you do, how we can follow you all, and leave us some food for thought to end this beautiful hour-long chat that we've had with you all.
So you can follow us on social media at Show and Heal. We're everywhere. And you can also email us at celebrate@showandheal.org or sunainadevi.integrativehealth@gmail.com. In our resource handout, you'll see all of these this information on our social media. And thank you all for listening. And Sunaina, do you want to get the last word?
Yes, thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, please let us know. Please enjoy the resource handout that we've put together for you. It's rich and packed full of stuff, and it's pages and pages. And some of these portals are incredible organizations that are doing amazing work, and we like to lift them and acknowledge them as well. So some of these portals you can kind of enter and get lost in there. But utilize technology right now, especially during the pandemic. Don't shy away from it. Technology can bring all of this stuff, all of these experiences right into your living room. And along those lines, we are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're everywhere. So find us and continue to engage in conversation with us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all so much. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to have this enriching conversation today. I see that some folks are writing in the chat box saying, thank you, awesome presentation. So as our guest speakers have mentioned, the rewatch email that you get for joining us live, we appreciate you, first of all, for joining us live. In the rewatch email, you will get this really in-depth, I've seen it already and I'm excited to dive into it as well, the PDF of resources that they've put together to really support all of the dialogue that they've shared with us today. So watch for that in your email and enjoy the rest of your week and take care of yourselves, everyone.